Hey, what's happening, everyone? William Johnson here, and I'm excited to be with you all here at the Fuquay Varina Art Center in Fuquay Varina, downtown. And of course, since this is virtual, well, we're really international here, right? So all over the world, wherever you're watching this video from. Today, what I wanted to do is talk a little bit about, well, today, it might be next week, might be next year, I don't know, whenever you're watching this. But in this moment, I want to talk about a set that I did with Erin Jones-Fuson. She's a harpist, and we did a duet here at the Art Center the day before this particular taping, and it was a wonderful time in music. And Erin is an incredible harpist, and I just want to talk about the setup that I have going on here, and then progress from that, from what you see, into why I'm playing what I'm playing. And perhaps some of you that are percussionists or aspiring to play a drum or learning more about rhythm, and you don't have to have a drum at home, because some of the things I'm going to talk about, you could probably practice on a table, on your dining room table. Husbands, hopefully you won't get in trouble with your wives, or children with your parents. But hey, when a passion is burning, you got to let it go, right? But don't quote me, don't get me in trouble there. Just do what you do. But anyways, I want to talk about this setup. While I play the drum set, I'm particularly more drawn towards instruments like these. I started out with the congas, actually, which are not the bongos. They're the larger, longer ones with a little more lower body, which is a great thing that I bring up, saying bongos. Oftentimes, anything that doesn't look necessarily like a drum set is referred to as bongos. So I am often the bongo guy, the bongo man, the guy that plays bongos, the little dude on the bongos, but these really aren't bongos. They all have their particular names and their particular origins. But I am drawn to Latin music and Latin percussion. And when we say Latin percussion, often here in the Americas, we're often talking about Cuban or maybe even Mexican styles and genres and subgenres, such as the Cuban rumba, which later comes the salsa or the mambo, like the golden ages in the 50s and the 30s, 40s, and 50s. And then later on in the 60s and 70s with salsa. And then you have artists like Mark Anthony, right? And so that is Cuban. And it, of course, is an adaptation in Puerto Rico. So there's in Puerto Rico, salsa is like Puerto Rico's adapted salsa as one of their own folk traditions, as well as other countries. For instance, this drum that I'm sitting on, this cajon, is actually originates from Peru. From the slaves that were brought through the transatlantic slave trade down to South America. Well, ultimately, they were not allowed to play their instruments. And so they brought with them various traditions from West Africa, whether it was the Congo or Angola, or whether it was Nigeria with the Yorubas. There were a multitude of just different styles, and the slaves blended these styles and memories, but many times were not allowed to play the drums. So in places like Peru, they had shipping crates. And the term cajon, which this is a cajon, right, actually means box, but not box like cardboard box in Spanish, but it actually means, it's like caja, like a furniture, like a dresser drawer or a shipping crate. So they took these shipping crates in this wood and repurposed it in a very sophisticated way to get a sound, a very particular sound that they wanted, and it was creolized. Here in the States, when we hear the term Creole, we often think of Louisiana, but really that just means coming from Europe and then being raised away from Europe, outside of Europe. So creolized meaning something evolving from another place. So these particular instruments, they were evolving Even though they were coming from West Africa, the traditions, they were blending them with Spanish. And in Peru, there was a fusion happening. So they created these boxes, these cajons, and different traditions began to come, like Lando or Festejo, that's like a fusion festejo pattern. But you got Zamacueca, Lando, Festejo, Toromata, which is like a Lando, but some believe is a whole genre in of itself. So they had this whole tradition for hundreds of years in Peru with the cajon. Now, there are different types of cajons, but the type that you sit on, a box like this, and perhaps some of you have seen this instrument in a church. It's very popular in houses of worship, used and for singer-songwriters as well. But this instrument pops up, or at least as a box, in different Latin American countries and throughout the Caribbean. But this style is from Peru. Originally, however, it didn't have snares inside of it. So if I play the bass, it's like a kick drum. It's like a drum set in a box, right? But then you have this snappy sound that I'm playing there. That's the snare, right? Well, that snare, that sizzle that you hear, that sta-ta, is because there's actually snares inside. Originally, there were no snares inside of the Peruvian cajon. It was left open. And this is actually a two-sided cajon. So the back side here does not have snares. And you can tell there's a completely different sound. It's a little darker. You hear a little more of the tones of the actual wood. Of course, later on, people, like this particular cajon actually took snares, like from a snare drum, and took like half snares, cut them up, and put them inside the cajon. There's some that have them where they flip on and off. You have electronic cajons now. So it's just really grown into all different types of styles. So a lot of people, when they start off with the cajon, they're doing some more like 2 and 4 and some rock and pop stuff, which I'll talk about in a second. However, I have a bunch of different things that I did with Aaron Jones-Fuson, the harpist here. And if you haven't seen that video and you're watching this one, I highly suggest you go to that video and check it out. Aaron has an amazing facility on the cajon and on the harp, and a beautiful voice. However, Aaron is also a singer-songwriter. So for me, the cajon just makes a lot of sense playing with Aaron. Also, it's very light, and it's a lot easier to just travel around than with the congas or an entire drum set. So it's easy for me to just play with this as the bass. And it can be EQ'd in a variety of ways. We can get a little more attack, a little less attack. With the singer-songwriters with a vintage feel, I like the open sound anyways, especially if it's just myself and a guitarist and there's no bass player. Kind of want to fill that space out. So I decided for this particular duet with Aaron to bring the cajon and to bring this drum in front of me. And this drum in front of me is actually a frame drum. We call it a frame drum because the frame of it is actually thinner than the circumference of the head. So, frame drum. And frame drums have been played for thousands of years. You can read accounts of frame drums in the Bible, in the Old Testament. Tambourines are a form of frame drum. You see drawings in caves, drawings in old manuscripts and paintings of people playing frame drums. This one is a tar, T-A-R, and it is by an amazing company out of the Northeast here in the States. But it just has a very enchanting sound to me, and it just goes really well with what Aaron was doing as singer-songwriter. But if I particularly love to travel with at least one hand drum that has some kind of skin membrane because I'm drawn to that sound. So this is a lot lighter than a conga drum. It's thinner in sound, but I can still get all of that sound. Almost like a definite pitch instrument, meaning that if the song is like in the key of E major or something, then I can, tune it almost to get close to those sounds. So as opposed to more, I guess, atonal or not indefinite pitch stuff. But anyways, I digress. a little diatribe there. I love playing on the frame drum here. It's light. I can put it right on the snare stand and just play it like a snare. And the brush sound of it is incredible. Now, I also bring it up because if you're wanting to get into this, or you are a drummer and you want to get into playing more hybrid acoustic stuff like this, frame drums are easily accessible in the world of monetary. Frame drums like this one they're accessible in the price range, in the price area. However, this one's a little more expensive, but companies such as Remo and other companies make some great sounding drums that are, well under $100. And so for some of you that are not sure if you really want to get into it, but you're definitely liking that kind of tone and texture, that's a good way to start to get into that. So I also love to play, I never leave home without a shaker. So I want to talk about real quick some of these other things that I have, and then just show you some techniques that you can do. Because some of these things, like I brought an egg shaker, some of you, especially those of you that have children, may have one or two of these lying around, and you may want to get into it. Or perhaps you're a singer or a musician, and you want to learn a little bit more about playing that or teach those that are in your band. So I want to talk about briefly some of the things that I brought here, perhaps where they're from, and just give you some techniques. So shakers, man, listen, I never leave home without a shaker when I'm doing an event. And honestly, even if I'm just going for a walk, there's probably a shaker in my van. You just never know, right? So, but for me, a shaker, being here in Central Carolina, I live not too far from this particular area in Fuquay Varina, and this area calls for a lot of contemporary songs, right? So whether it's singer-songwriters, it could be pop, it could be contemporary worship, it might be gospel. But out of all the instruments that I play, I'm probably playing the shaker more than anything else, and I'm okay with that. There's a lot of virtuosity that can be pulled out of an instrument like this. So you have basic 4/4 stuff, and right now this is a 16th note groove that is based on, it's kind of a fusion of a Brazilian samba. And when I say 16th note, for those of you that are a little familiar with music theory, you may understand where I'm going to explain this really quick, but for some of you, you may not be. If you're in 4/4, that just means that there's a pattern of 4 beats, and then that pattern starts over. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, you can have the whole beat, 1, 2, 3, 4, that lasts all 4, or you can have 8th notes, which is 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and then you can have 16 notes within those 4 beats. So that's all I mean by 16th notes. And if you were to count to 4, I would have played 16 individual little notes. Or you can count them like this: 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 3 E and a, 4 E and a, right? Or cacophony, 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 right? So that's a shaker groove that I use a lot. But a simple shaker groove, just to start off, is just playing it back and forth for 8th notes. 1 and 2, 3, 4. And what I'm doing is I'm adding a little bit of dynamics, some accents when I go back. And I'm holding it with these 3 fingers, just like this, right? That's what we call, drummers call fulcrum. That's where it's pivoting off of. The other fingers are really there to support. Like if I want to do this, something like this, right? Or if I want to do a double, like a double stroke. But really, it's these 3 fingers. And when I go back, I'm playing it a little louder. So that gives it some character, as opposed to just doing this. Instead of 1 and 2. And it's very slight, but it changes the emotion of the song. So, yeah, that's a little bit of the shaker. I'm actually writing an ebook just about shakers because there's so much that you can pull out of it. It really is about dynamic. So what I'm doing here is something that you could just start, and you don't have, a lot of people say, oh, what's a good shaker? Where can I get a good shaker? Okay, you don't have to go anywhere and buy anything if you have a kitchen. If you have a kitchen and you like to cook especially, or you like to bake, if you like to bake, you really don't need to go buy a shaker. Or cook, you probably have a bunch of containers that eventually go empty in your kitchen. Or you probably have, be honest, you probably have a spice that you hardly ever use and it's expired. You could just dump that spice out and then start experimenting. Put some dried rice. For instance, this came in a food packet. I forget what they're called, but they're not paying for this video, so we won't worry about that. But this is a little jelly container, right? It used to have jam. It used to have jam in it. And I emptied it, washed it, put some dry rice, some rice grains in there, and it's glass, right? Like a jam bottle, but the top is metal. So when you shake it, it's a really soft sound, but the rice is a little brittle, right? But then when you turn it down here, it's very staccato. So you can experiment with the stuff that's in your kitchen. Staccato, I use that word. That's what I was doing here. But sometimes when you're playing a song, and you're playing with a beautiful, lush, warm ballad like Aaron Jones Fuson might play on, you don't want to play too staccato. All those T's and very more accented where you can hear each note and rhythm. Sometimes you want them to blend, and we call that legato. So it's swishy. And that is a whole different emotion than this. For instance, if I played a groove, I'm playing legato, keeping it swishy. Now if I play a staccato, and I'm playing with the dynamics, the volume, you notice it can change the different feel of the song. There's so much that can be pulled out of this shaker, or out of any shaker, rather. But yeah, and I told you about the little jam bottles. And this guy right here is what's called a one-shot. I love it because sometimes when you're playing with a shaker and you want to do this kind of, it's hard to really control all this stuff in there if you just want it to go like a hi-hat, where like on a cymbal, or to you just want the sound of the attack of the stick on the actual thing you're striking. Well, the stuff inside, there's a chamber, and it only allows it to go one way. So if I flipped it upside down, if you were holding it, it would really mess with your mind, because when I'm going back, it's actually going, but when I'm going down, it's not making a sound. So it's pretty interesting. But that allows me to have more control. So if I have two of them, I can play different types of hi-hat patterns if I wanted to. And speaking of hi-hat, which is the two cymbals, that one on top, one on the bottom, that you use with your foot on the drum set, this is why I always bring brushes with me. At minimum, I like to have a cajon and a shaker if I'm playing with the singer-songwriter. But over the last few years, I've played with a lot of brushes because the brush gives me that. I'm just in the beginning of the song, right? And so when I go into the later on, so now I can build, right, levels in the song. So I'm using all of these things, So really, and it's experimenting. There's been times where I didn't have a brush, but I was at a venue and I needed something. And so I basically just found something. I mean, these are just steel wires. I found something around the building that had that sound. In fact, a few weeks ago, I was at a place and I didn't have a brush for the sound check. And I went to the side of the stage and found a broom, twisted off the broom handle, and it was a small broom, and it had holes in it. So I put my hand in it and just played the edge of the broom on there and got a similar sound. So it's really thinking about the sound. It's really thinking about the sound that you're going for, right? And once upon a time, these things were actually fly swatters. In the turn of the century, actually maybe around the 20s or so, late 20s, 30s, jazz drummers started playing with these brushes and, stuff like. But they started experimenting with fly swatters. And eventually the drum companies started saying, well, they're doing that. Why don't we make something for brushes, slap our name on it, and market it as an actual drum stick or brush? And then you can charge a little more money for it. But at the end of the day, that's what they were. They were fly swatters. So you liberate yourself a little bit when you think about the sound, and then instead of just saying, what kind do I need to buy? What's a good one? What's this and that? Well, you choose. Go for the sound. But it's still a good question. So what about these interesting things that are to my right that I'm playing here? Well, I actually have some keys. Now, when I'm playing with Erin, I want to have something bright because the songs, even though she's playing the harp and that carries the bright sound, I want to also, every now and then, it's so warm, right? And we use these kind of terms as musicians. But sometimes I want something that's a little metallic, sparkle. So I love playing with chimes. But sometimes chimes are too pretty, especially if they're just pitched perfectly, like the chimes itself for percussionists. So these are actually, these are actual keys, like car keys, house keys. And I guess keys are usually made out of nickel, silver, and brass. And so these are a silver or bronze or brass. But those and the silver ones tend to make that sparkle sound, that nice sparkle sound. And there's enough dissonance. So it's almost like this bouncing, like the sound is not completely right here, right? So if someone's singing or there's a instrument playing, like a flute or whatever, it just goes really nice, But it's dissonant, meaning it's not all together in a scale, a mode that is popular. And that is actually good because it gives it some different kind of character. So I like the other chimes, but I love playing these. Plus, they're just neat to look at. It's like, he's actually playing keys. And interestingly, they're actually held on by dental floss. And, again, something that you probably have in your house. You can go to a locksmith and go in there, and they'll probably be like, what do you need them for? But you can ask them if they have a box of reject keys that they're not going to do anything with, if you can have them. And that's what I did, and I got about 300 keys from them. So I've made a couple different ones of these. Then you have this Tibetan pin chime. I just love the way they sound. And that's just a really nice, every now and then, if you just want to punctuate a verse, something that's said in the verse of a song, or from chorus to verse, or from verse to chorus, really from chorus to verse, when you're really up here, and then you just kind of want to end it, da-da-da-da, ba-king, and then da-da-da-da-bum-bum. So stuff like that, I think in grammatical terms, right? Periods, exclamation marks, stuff like that. So then I have these seeds from West Africa. And they're actually seeds from a tree. Got these tiny little seeds. Got these bigger seeds. They're really loud. And they can get even louder than that. That's probably on a 1 to 10. That's probably a 6. My man Dave knows about how loud they can get. Well, maybe not. Maybe because I haven't really destroyed his microphones yet. But not that I'm going to destroy any microphones. And then I have these palm fronds, which they're actually like a little palm tree, off a palm tree. And they have little seeds inside of them. Great instruments. These are what I call my ambient instruments. When I want ambient sounds, just extra colors and textures in the song. But they can also be used as a little backbeat. So if So you add a little bit of, reverb to that. It goes really well with a guitar, acoustic guitar, or the harp. And sometimes you want, when you're playing I call this a minimalist setup. Some of you might be like, that is not a minimalist setup. But when you're playing a minimalist setup like this, you don't have a bunch of different snares. So you need to have those sounds. And this is already not way up there like a snare drum would be. So sometimes you need to start softer. So you have to change the actual thing that you're using, right? And it might be this. So I might go from here to there to actually here. And it sounds like I'm playing like 5 different instruments, you know? So that's a little bit about the instruments that I brought. One thing that I did say about the shaker that I think is neat is how you hold it is almost everything. So if you have an egg shaker like this, if you're holding it and you're kind of putting a little bit of pressure, you mute the sound. And that's actually a good thing if you want to add accents. So what I'm going to do is play this groove and I'll release on the upbeats, the and, right? The and beats, a finger or two, and that will create an accent. So if I release one finger, the accent's it's more subdued than 2. Or if I release 3. Or if I create more tension and then let go of the tension and release the fingers. Or if I vary the tension. So you have all of that. And then, of course, I could talk about shakers all day. I could talk about playing 2 and playing independent stuff like. There's all kinds of different things, different rhythms you could play. But, yeah, there's a world of exploration in that. So, back to the cajon. I also have, and capping it with this, is a foot pedal. Sometimes, now the way I have this foot pedal, this is a little counterintuitive probably. I actually have a regular drum foot pedal down here, and it's faced backwards. And the reason being is because they do make foot pedals just for cajons, where you can put it there and you can play like a normal foot pedal. But I bought one years ago, and it snapped on me, and I just was like, I don't feel like buying another one. So I don't do it enough that, it matters. But actually what happened in the course of doing that, I got pretty used to playing it backwards, which is a little more difficult because it's hard to do the double notes on the I sounded like the guy from Looney Tunes when I did that. That's all, folks. But that is a little difficult, but, I can actually just take the foot pedal out of the way if I want to. But sometimes you want what we call 4 on the floor. So every quarter note, every beat is being played, right? So if I'm playing the cajon as my foundation, like my kick and my snare, well then, if I want to play a snare and a shaker, or a snare and the congas on my side, or a floor tom, I'm stuck because I can't move that hand, right? So sometimes I need to have that. With me. And I have to think almost like a composer or an arranger too. I have to think, when I go from my hand to this foot pedal, the sound's going to change, especially if we really dial it in. So I have to be aware of that and where my transition is. But usually if you're playing with a bunch of other instruments, it'll kind of blend in a little bit. Depends, I guess, on the room. But that's why I usually use a foot pedal with it, and I just put it there. And if it's here like this backwards, I can just move it out of the way if I really want to go just to play with my hands. So let me show you a couple of different rhythms, or let me play a little bit. I'll just do a little solo, and I'm going to take some rhythms from Puerto Rico. I'm going to take some improvisation and maybe some influences from Peru that I was talking about, and just mix it a little bit, maybe scat on top, and go a little something like this. Cuando camino en el bosque, escuché el viento a través de la hoja, cantan las aves, al río de la tierra, mi corazón baila, porque te veo. Ah. There's no place like your presence. There's no sound like your voice. There's no place that I'd rather be. Where my soul longs for the day, and every tear's wiped away. 'Cause you revive and make me new. Yes, you do. Well, you revive and make me new. Yes, you do. Yeah, so that's the cajon, a little bit of percussion. I've enjoyed hanging out with you all today. Hopefully I have not caused your eyes to gloss over and to bore you. And if you've made it to the end of this video, congratulate yourself and go to Disney World. I don't know, I'm just joking. Anyway, hopefully I will be back to do another class like this to talk a little bit about percussion, maybe some other instruments. I got a couple hundred in my studio I'd love to bring out here back with you and hang out with. If you want to learn a little bit more about myself or my music, I was singing a song called Buscando por la Luz for about 10 seconds. That's on it's on my upcoming 4th album. But you can go to WilliamJohnsonMusic.com. You can listen or check out my 3 solo albums there, some music I've done with other artists, my YouTube channel at William Johnson Music. Got some pretty cool stuff over there, some vlogs, some percussion tutorials. If you want to learn about the cajon, if you only talked about a little bit or that's over my head, I've got some really cool basic stuff about shakers, the cajon, the congas, the bongos, the djembe, all of that on my website at WilliamJohnsonMusic.com. That will take you, and there's the links there, to my YouTube channel where you can learn more. So you can check that out if you're on the socials. William Johnson Music on Instagram and William Johnson Music on Facebook. Oh, you'll see my face or my logo with my face, the lion and the drum. Hopefully it's me, not a hacked account. But yeah, so you can learn more about me there. And I hope to see you there. Let me know that you perhaps saw this video. I'd love to hear from you. God bless you. Heaven smile upon you. Maybe I'll see you soon.